make a start. Everyone, welcome to the ILEX Managing People and Teams who are working from home. This is all about leading teams and helping people who are managing virtually. My name is Nick Winston. I'm a business psychologist that works with ILEX. And before we get into too much stuff, I'm just going to go through some basic domestic points and answer some of the questions that have come in around technology straight away as well. So when people join, we get them to automatically join muted. The reason for this is because this is for a large number of attendees. We're trying to help as many people as possible. And it's just about cutting down that background noise where everyone can hear clearly. Now, a few of you have already discovered that there is a question box. It's a great way to interact. So a few of you are using that already. I won't be able to answer all questions as we go through just because we are now at 208, 209 attendees. However, the question box is recorded as well, so we may be able to come back to you with different things. There's a couple of people experiencing sound issues, so I will say that this is being recorded as well for you. Speak to your account manager, and we can probably make that recording available to you on Friday when we will send out a summary document of what's been covered here as well, and a link to one more video that I'm going to mention. And no, you won't need a mic. As long as you can see the screen and hear, you are okay. Having any other problems with hearing, then I would say maybe try calling in separately on the phone. That's another option that you can do. If not, then I would recommend logging in, logging out. Generally speaking, the sound problems are should be very, very minimal though. Okay, Rachel, I'm just going to ask you, can you hear me okay? You're going to be my little test case if that's all right, and that lets me know whether most people can.
Yes, I can hear you absolutely fine, Nick. I'm just responding to those people who are saying they have sound issues.
Lovely.
But
Okay.
I think not on your end, so you go ahead.
Lovely. I will leave that with you then, Rachel, if that's okay. For anyone, again, who is suffering any particular technical issues, because, hey, this happens, don't worry. The backup plan is a recording for you. The final point on all of this in terms of WebEx stuff is, by all means, make notes as you go through. It's a wonderful thing to do. We're going to be covering off quite a lot of content for you in the next 60 minutes. If there's something that you think stands out, why not make a note of it? Here's a quick tip as well. You can take screenshots. So we'll send a summary over to you, but by all means, just hit Control, print screen, and you will, in essence, photograph what is on the screen. That means you can then use that content, just put it into a Word document or something like that, and then you can reflect on it after. As mentioned, though, there is a summary guide that's going to go out to you as well. Now, this is our second virtual session that ILEX have offered out to our clients to try and help in this particular time of crisis. Our first one was on resilience. This one is all about virtual working, how we lead people when they are working from home. So here are the three main areas we're going to look at over the next 60 minutes. Quickly, we're going to look at the pros and cons of virtual working. It's important to have a clear idea, actually, of whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. We've currently been forced into it, but a lot of clients are now looking at this as a possible way to move forward in the future. I wonder if you're one of them. We're going to identify some of the challenges that are unique to your team and situation because everyone is different. So I'll go through some of the most frequent and common ones, and we'll also look at ways that we can resolve those as well. And that should feed us in quite nicely to the 5 principles of managing virtual teams. So we've called those clarity, coaching, communication, significance, and dashboards. And what you should see is they all fit together quite nicely and create an ongoing idea of how to manage almost any problem that pops up from managing virtually. Lovely. Let's jump straight into it then and have a look at some of these pros and cons, i.e. where things go well, where they may not go well when we are home working. We're going to look at this across these 5 areas. We've chosen these 5 areas because they're important, but they are not the only areas we could have looked at. The first one is to look at the impact of allowing people to work virtually or from home on diversity and inclusion. Now, this is a big bit for most of our client organizations. Everyone wants the very best ideas, which means you need diversity of thought. However, in order to get true diversity of thought, people need to be not just present, but to feel truly included as well. Now, working from home or allowing people to do that can remove a number of the barriers, both physical and psychological, to entering work. That's why, generally speaking, this is a big plus for diversity and inclusion. Areas and countries in the world where people have embraced virtual working even more, such as Japan, we're finding that suddenly there's a whole group of people that have never been able to work before because they couldn't physically get to an office, and now they can. In Norway and Scandinavia, we're finding that lots of people who are primary carers are suddenly able to do a job because the job starts at 9, not the commute that starts at 7:30. So we find that allowing people, where possible, to work from home and do virtual working has a big positive bonus on diversity and inclusion. Of course, at the moment, a lot of what we're facing isn't the allowed stuff, it's the enforced stuff. But moving forward, it's always good to know. Our next element, the sense of team. Now, this is one where things don't look so good. Unfortunately, when people are not in face-to-face contact, they don't have those soft, nice little conversations whilst making a coffee, it really can affect sense of team. People don't share jokes quite as much traditionally when they're not in the office, although we're seeing that change right now. It's interesting stuff. So sense of team is something that can be harmed, most definitely, by virtual working. The good news is we're going to look at how we can remove that. In fact, one of our last pieces, Significance, deliberately tackles how we can really boost that sense of team if we have a distributed team across the country or people working from their homes. Our next one. So our next one is a bit of a no-brainer. It's lovely. It's the commute. There's 283 people currently on this WebEx. Unfortunately, that's too many people for me to ask you all individually, how long is your commute? What I can do, though, I can share some general statistics that were given to us by the TUC in the UK. So the average commute time at the moment in the UK is 58.4 minutes. That's one way. So that's just a little bit under 2 hours 20 per day. I wonder what you could do and what your people could do with all of that extra time. By the way, the commute time in London, for any of our clients in London, 81 minutes. That's the average commute time in London. This morning I was running a session for a German company. I got very jealous when they told me that their average commutes were 15 minutes and 25 minutes. It was wow, that's unheard of in the UK. That's not how things work for us. So in terms of virtual working, there is this enormous saving that can be made with commutes. Now, hold on a second, Nick. Don't you realize that my commute is my valuable time? It's the time when I get my mind ready. It's the time when I do my reading. It's the time when I leave my loud children at home and actually enjoy some peace on a train where no one talks to each other. Yep, we can use the commute time in a very valuable way. So what we'll look a little bit later is how we can use that time differently, but positively. And there are some wonderful savings that can be made with your commute time and where you can convert it into something even more productive than sitting on a train, reading or prepping for the day. And that links us in to our next little category, mental health. Now, this is a really interesting one. In general, the signs are that virtual working and home working, when allowed, really boosts mental health. However, and there's a big however here, a lot of this is anecdotal information or small surveys. Actually, officially speaking, from a scientific point of view, and we like to approach things from an evidence base, there's too many variables for a gold standard trial and a definitive answer. So what we would say is that there seems to be a growing body of evidence that indicates that allowing people the option of working from home or virtual working can very much boost mental health. And in a few slides time, we're going to see some studies on that or reference to some studies on that. However, the Applied Psychology Society says that there is no definitive answer yet, although it could be because that statement was about 9 months ago. It could be that in about 2 or 3 months' time, actually, we do have a definitive answer. So, boost of diversity and inclusion, good thing. Sense of team can suffer. Commute, wow, that's amazing. We can remove the commute when we work from home. That's wonderful. Mental health, probably good, seems to be good, but we're not 100% sure. And that just leaves us with one final little piece there. Productivity. It's the big one, and it's the one where we have a really good data set as well. A lot of studies have been done around this. Perhaps one of the most exciting was a 2-year study by Stanford University. Now, they worked with companies around the world giving advice on how to create virtual learning setups and virtual home working setups. They then measured what was happening. They generally found there was, and by the way, they weren't doing this as a paid consultancy piece. They were doing this as a research piece. So they weren't trying to prove a point. They were trying to truly investigate a point. The biggest single thing they found was a direct increase in productivity. And that was pretty much across the board. Different types of company, different industries, different cultures. The next thing they found as well were lower attrition rates and fewer sick days. Now, that is an indication, it's not proof, but it's an indication, as anyone in HR or L&D will tell you, people are happier, they're more engaged. You get lower attrition and fewer sick days when your workforce are happy and on board. The final one was the lower operational costs. And if you're looking at this from an operational point of view and thinking, is this something I can introduce to my company properly after the COVID-19 emergencies? Our advice would be, Ctrip started in 1999. It's now the largest travel agency in the world. It's the kind of travel agency of China. It's an online system, employs about 45,000 people. It's headquartered in Shanghai. Shanghai is an expensive place to have office space. So what Ctrip wanted to do was look at, could they reduce their operational overhead costs by allowing people to work virtually and from home? Would this mean increased costs because of the technology that they'd have to employ? And by the way, this is one of the ones where Stanford University advised and studied what was happening. What they found was they got an immediate 13.5% productivity boost. I mean, that is pretty massive given they weren't even going for that. What they were going for was just reduced operational costs. They had no idea they would get such a big productivity boost from their people. They're not alone. Many companies have done this. Here are some other kind of big examples. One that I particularly like, Best Buy in the United States, very different culture to Ctrip. So we've got two very different types of companies. Best Buy has around 125,000 employees. And my understanding is that when they looked at this, they were curious about increasing mental health and engagement. So this wasn't an operational cost reduction. This was very much, it's all about, okay, how can I make my people happier? What they found was by offering this out, they got a 35% productivity boost. How could this be happening, Nick? Well, the first answer is we don't know. We don't know the exact reasons, but we do have some good theories. What happens when you reduce someone's commute by, say, 10 hours a week? You give them back a day. That's 20% of their time that they've just got back. Only it's not just 20% of their time, because now they're happier and more refreshed as well. What happens when you empower people to make a choice about where they are going to work? Their engagement goes up. When engagement goes up, people have increased productivity as well. The idea is that actually probably there's lots of different reasons happening in concert that increase productivity when we allow people to work from home. Now, by the way, this is a bell curve. So this is a distribution curve. So there are people who are not as productive from home, but the majority are more productive. And of course, some are incredibly more productive as well. So those are just two quick examples of large organizations that have embraced this over the last couple of years. And it's worked out really nicely for them. And there are a lot of organizations doing this. Probably one of the most notable was Microsoft recently. A study in the UK by Canada Life Insurance looked at the reported rates of work-related stress, and particularly work-related stress. And generally, they found that home workers reported about 50% less work-related stress. In fact, the figures off the top of my head were 16% and 36%. That's a big difference. If you're concerned about mental health in your organization, and hopefully you are, then generally speaking, this is a really positive thing for you. Claire, I'm just going to read your comment. That looks great. There is one argument that says productivity may have increased because they are working longer hours. That may end up counterproductive for employers' health in the longer term. Yes, you're absolutely right. So this is one of the things that we're observing happening, is that people, and it's one of the danger points, people are more likely to go the extra mile. One reason for this, or one piece of thinking, is that people are worried about looking bad, so they make sure they look good. Another piece of thinking is, well, it gets to 5:30 and you know you need to stay another hour, but you also know you've got that hour commute after. That puts your home time at 7:30. Oh, this is so tiring. Whereas actually, if it gets to 5:30 and you know you have another hour, and then at the end of that hour, you can go open a bottle of wine, walk in the park, cuddle your children, jump in the hot tub, do whatever it is that you want to do, you're more likely to engage for that last hour as well. So we don't know why they are working longer hours, but absolutely, there's two things going on. One is they're more productive, i.e. one is they're working more hours. The second is the quality of the work does seems to increase as well. Dilip, good point around sedentary life. We're going to cover that though in a little bit, because helping people to make sure they stay active and have a good structure with their home life, including exercise, absolutely, that's one of the things that's we're going to have a look at. When parents are juggling childcare, thank you, Sonali, is a really big one, which is why we are definitely going to have a look at this. Thank you for all these questions, guys. I really like that you're giving me questions where we are going to cover this through in our presentation though, which is nice. Okay, so first of all, if these statistics are all great, if clearly there's some big benefits to be had around productivity, finances, engagement, and probable benefits around mental health, why aren't we all doing it? Well, there's a few quite big reasons for this. First one, some of us can't. Some of us are in positions where you absolutely need to be frontline and present. Other people, however, aren't. I'm not going to share the organization or the person, but I know one person right now that wanted to work from home and they were told by their boss, definitely not, under no circumstances can you work from home. It's a really bad example for the team. I'm just going to share two things around this. The individual works for a hospital in the NHS, and the individual works in the purchasing team. He said, Nick, there isn't a single element of my job that I need to be in a physical office for. I've already been working there for years. I've got great relationships. So sometimes we have this really bad reaction against the idea, even though we actually can do it. And we're going to be exploring that a little bit more in just a few seconds. One of the other big reasons, technology. Now, the technology has changed and evolved recently, which is great. Technology is getting better and better and better all the time. Right now, it is struggling. I am doing a lot of virtual sessions, and some of them are really struggling on the bandwidth. Generally speaking, this is on the other side, not on my side. But the fact is that Cisco, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, all of these systems are taking a pounding at the moment as thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the country are attending virtual meetings and things like that. I mean, right now we have 305 attendees on this particular WebEx. So technology has been a blocker in the past, but it's becoming much less of a blocker as we move forward. Now, here's the big reason. The real reason that most organizations have not fully embraced virtual and home working yet. We're human beings. We're worried about it. If my people are all working from home, what are they up to? Yes, no, I know they're lovely people and they're hard workers and they're good, but when they joke about having a wine at 11 o'clock, well, that isn't a funny joke. The fact is that a general feeling of this is new, this is unknown, means that people are far less likely to absolutely engage in it. Are you ever worried about what your people may be doing at home? I wonder if you've seen some funny WhatsApp memes and Facebook things going around and thinking, hang on, how are people creating these things? How have people got the time to actually do this? So generally find it's fear of the unknown and fear of something new that can really reduce embracing this. So in a moment, we're going to have a look at some of the challenges that often pop up, and we're getting a lot of those challenges come through on the questions as well. So I'm going to read out some of those from Abigail, from Emma, etc. So Abigail is mentioning that finding teams' productivity has increased during the lockdown because of reduced distractions. Lovely, absolutely. Maybe we're not doing as many meetings where we discuss a meeting to analyze a meeting, to plan for a meeting while sharing some jokes as well. It's lovely stuff, excellent. Emma says, some companies don't trust some platforms due to security concerns. How can we reduce these concerns? That's an interesting one. I would say probably get some more training around influencing skills. Very quickly, I would suggest something called naming the fear. So this wasn't planned as part of this WebEx, but we like to react and respond where possible. Ask people what the key concern is. Then ask, what would they need to know, see, or have in place that issue was reduced as a worry. It doesn't actually solve the problem, but what we're doing is a psychological technique that reduces worry. By the way, this comes from things like psychological counseling. Someone is frightened of getting on a plane. Tell them, what is it that you are worried about or specifically fear? They might say, well, it's the engine. What if the engine stops working? Okay, that seems quite reasonable to me. So what would you like to know, see, or have in place that could reduce that fear? Well, I'd want to know that the engine was really well maintained and looked after, that the engineers had a good log of it, and that everything was, being really well looked after. Okay, you're flying with British Airways or you're flying with Lufthansa. Do you believe the engineers care about those engines? Well, yes. Do you believe that they need to take a log of everything they do on that engine? Yes, I do. And I can show you, by the way, that that's a legal requirement for them to do that. Now, what we're doing is we're not instantly getting rid of that fear of flying, but by naming the fear, drawing it out, and then coaching someone in terms of what would you need to see, know, or have in place, you can start to lessen their fears. So if there's a fear of technology, we can still use that same approach as well. Let's carry on and have a look at some of the individual challenges. I wonder how many of these you are going to be able to relate to. I suspect most of them, unfortunately. We're going to look at this from 2 points of view, from the management point of view, and also from an employee point of view. From a manager's point of view, it's all about keeping in control whilst also not being a micromanager. We want to be reassured that people are getting on with the work, that they know what they're doing, that they feel supported, that they feel part of a team. And when we're working virtually, we can sometimes feel that all of these things can go. Can we trust our staff? Are they clear on what we want them to do? Now, as an employee, what can make it difficult is personal setting, surrounding, environment, technology, all of those things. And again, we're going to discuss those a little bit more as we go through. But I tell you what else, does my boss trust me? Actually, do I know what's happening? It's interesting that when we started running these sessions a few weeks ago, specifically for COVID-19, we started running them with smaller groups and we were asking, what are the issues? And here's what we found. They were the same on both sides. Whether you are a manager or an employee, for this to work, we need clarity and trust. And that trust comes with communication. And that clarity comes with communication as well. So kind of in the heart of this, we find communication absolutely becomes a key thing. Okay, let's have a look at what we can do about all this, how we can actually set some structures and processes in place to help our people when they are working from home, and also to help ourselves when we are either managing people from home or when we're the people working from home as well. Kevin and Louise, thanks for the comments. I'm going to come to them in the next couple of slides. That's the only reason I'm not answering that at the moment. I'm just going to do a quick pause to check in on our chat box as well. Lovely. Thank you, Rachel. Much appreciated. Excellent. Okay, let's move forward and start to have a look at actually how we deal with these individual challenges. So in this, what we're going to do is start introducing you to the 5 principles of managing virtual teams. The 5 principles simply are. And our last, but not our least, what we'll do now is go through each of those elements in detail, look at how they join with each other, and look at what practical elements you can take and use straight away to run a virtual team or to ease the running of a virtual team as well. Our first element, clarity. So we're going to have a look at what you need to be clear on and how you might actually go about achieving that clarity as well. With staff, we need to make sure we set clear expectations, first of all, on what needs to be done, but that is nowhere near as important as why it needs to be done. Now, I'm very aware that on a lot of these sessions, we get a high turnout of L&D staff and HR staff. So I'm going to make some assumptions about half of our attendees. You already know who Simon Sinek is. You already know the start with why video. You understand why it is so important to communicate a why. For the other half of you, very quickly, if you tell someone what, they can probably get it done. If you tell someone why, they can get it done even when the circumstances change, because now they understand what you are trying to achieve. Always make sure you share with your people what the key measure of success will be for any task and why it's being done. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you ask someone to prepare a report. They believe that the key measure of success is the report is incredibly accurate and is delivered by 10 a.m. on Wednesday. You know, however, that the purpose of that report is to keep 3 stakeholders happy. Yes, accuracy is important. Yes, the deadline is important, but far more important is that that report is engaging to those 3 stakeholders. If you communicate to your staff, we are generating this report for Sally, Tom, and Ingrid. They like things to be concise. They like the use of graphics. They like bottom line results. They don't want too much explanation. Then the individual working for you can prepare that report correctly. If you don't give them that why and that extra information, you may end up with something that the individual feels is brilliant, and your stakeholders say, why have you just handed me a 14-page report? This should be 3 lines. Explain the what needs to be done and the why. And this can include discussions around priorities as well. So again, for our L&D community and HR community, this is where you're going to be starting to use things like Eisenhower and Covey matrices, getting people to think about what the urgent and important is, the balancing of those things, and then prioritizing their lists. Another thing to have a chat about is the working hours. And this links back with what was mentioned earlier in the question box, where we said, is this people just working extra hours? Sometimes it can be. So have a conversation around the expectations of working hours. No, our day does not start at 10:30, but equally it doesn't start at 6:30. Or actually, perhaps it does. It depends on the individual employee that you have working for you and what job they're doing. But the key thing is, have that conversation and manage the expectations. Otherwise, your people may feel that you're expecting them to work 12, 13, 14-hour days. So have the conversation. The next thing to talk about is structure. And in a while, I'm going to show you how to have the conversation around structure, because it's a very specific conversation. We get people to map out what their old working day was like and what the new working day is going to be like. And finally, make sure you have clear reporting lines. And by clear, I mean, make sure your people understand those escalation lines. If something goes wrong, who do they contact and by what channel? Do you want a text message? Do you want a WhatsApp message? Do you want a phone call? Do you want an email? What is the right way and the right time service level agreement in order for escalations to happen if something goes wrong? If you get those elements in place, what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, what the expectations are around working hours and structure, and what to do if everything goes belly up, then we start to achieve some quite good clarity. Now, here are some ways to do this as well. If you are embarking very deliberately on a home working venture, you can do this in quite a formal fashion. If not, what we'd advise you to do is kind of pick up on what you think may be useful for you, ignore what it's too late to use. So here we go. It is always good to have an initial announcement that states actually what the expectations are. That can be a really, really useful thing to do. A formal email can clarify these points as well. Now, when you send out a formal email, you kind of make additional elements clear for people. Hi, everyone, just to confirm, our team is now allowing a 3 days from home, or given the current COVID-19, we are still working from home. These are our expectations. We're just making this clear because we know it's important for you. A great thing to do is a daily scrum. So a Scrum idea comes from agile methodology, fast-moving projects. And of course, in agile methodology, we have sprints, the idea that people are doing smaller projects within a project and doing a good evaluation and review at the end of that sprint before they start the next one. To help with the sprints, we have Scrum meetings. People get together, normally just for say 10 minutes or so, and quickly and clearly communicate what their priorities are, what their challenges are, and anything they think it's useful for the rest of the group to know. And that's not, it's Sheila's birthday. That's more, we had some issues with this technology or client or something yesterday. Scrums work brilliantly virtually. They work on almost any platform as well, because you can do what we call passing the baton. So we might say, and you guys don't actually have to do this, but I've got some names in front of you. You might say, Emma Ward, can you start off, please, and just share what your priorities are? And Emma, you don't need to do this. It's okay. Lovely. Thank you, Emma. Let's have Jay Bevan. Great. Let's have Kevin. Let's have Louise. And you can very quickly go through people and get the priorities and get people starting to feel that they are still part of a team. So that's what we mean by clarity. Think about setting clear expectations and think about how you are communicating those expectations as well. Now, one of the difficulties you might have with all these expectations is, of course, life isn't always that simple. So let's have a look next at what we might find ourselves coaching our people around. We asked what might distract you or stop you from working when you're at home. And there were some really common answers that started to pop up. Again, I'm sure you're going to recognize a lot of these. No dedicated place to work. My family distracts me. My flatmate distracts me. My dog distracts me. A lack of structure, a lack of understanding actually how the new day is going to work. What am I supposed to be doing? It's 9 o'clock. What am I supposed to be doing? Is this exercise time? Is this answering emails time? So a leader and a manager can help their staff enormously by using a coaching approach here. You're not going to be there to look over their shoulder all the time. So it's really good to be able to coach where possible. If someone tells me they have no dedicated place to work, I'm going to ask them questions such as, okay, where is the quietest place you have? Where is the place you are least likely to be distracted? What else can you do if you can't work in your home? Is there a way you can drown out the distractions around you? And from that, we might get them to say, actually, yeah, you know what? Some of the calls I can do while walking in the park. I don't need my laptop there. It is just a phone call and it's nice and quiet when I'm out there. Perhaps just wearing some earphones can help protect us from the distractions that are happening at home, such as family and flatmates. By asking these questions, you get people to come up with some good solutions, and it doesn't guarantee that there will be a perfect solution for them. But by using a coaching approach, we're helping them to start solving their own problems. And when you're not there to stand next to them all through the day, helping someone to solve their own problems is a key skill, definitely. Okay, what about family and flatmate distractions? This is the second biggest one. I thought it would be the first biggest, by the way, but actually it rates as the second biggest one. Family and flatmate distractions. What can we do about that? We can ask, what can you do about that? Is there anyone you can talk to in order to help arrange this? And what we generally find is by having some communication with family, with flatmate, with children, with husbands, wives, partners, we can start to work out a semblance of a new normal. I'll give you an example. I'll share with you my home life situation. I'm very, very fortunate. I have two young girls. I have an 11-month-old and a 7-year-old. The 11th-month-old, probably a bit difficult for me to communicate with them about what daddy is doing right now. The 7-month-old, Emily, she's brilliant. I'm so lucky with her. And so we've shared that actually daddy is doing work things at certain times. A little thing that I do, by the way, I don't know whether I might be accused of slave child labor here, but I actively encourage my little girl, Emily, to do things like make me a cup of tea before the session. It's all about including her and getting her to be part of this, whilst at the same time helping her to understand that we need quiet time in certain parts of the house at certain times. The key thing is there isn't a perfect solution for everyone. There's a conversation that needs to be had where you ask, what are your challenges with working from home? What ways can you overcome them? Because once we ask that question, smart people normally have some pretty good answers. The third one, structure. New structure, no structure, don't really know what we're doing here. And again, this is a lovely opportunity to do some really good coaching and just talk through with an individual what the expectations are. I quite like getting people to map out their old structure, the normal structure, and then create the new structure because some really lovely things start to happen. So these are not perfect structures. They're just some samples. And as you can see, I've left the majority of it blank. We don't really go to work and then do nothing until lunch. But right from the start, let's have a look at some of these changes. Well, immediately we have a wake up a half an hour later. Now, I don't know about you. There are very few people who don't welcome an extra half hour's sleep. Maybe that's not the case because your children are going to get you up earlier than that anyway. I don't know. But at least now we have that option. Notice that previously at 7:15 we were leaving for work. Now at 7:45 we have the option to do some exercise. And by the way, everyone, doing some exercise before you start your work changes the chemistry in your brain, the hormones and neurotransmitters. It makes you smarter, sharper, and healthier. You already knew that. You didn't need me to tell you that. But now it's an opportunity to have a chat with one of your members of staff around how they can start to introduce exercise into their daily routine where they didn't have time for it before. Oh my goodness, can we see how this might start to have a positive impact on mental health as well as physical health? Now, as you mentioned in the questions box, sometimes people do just stay at their screens longer and work harder. So what we've also done is have a look at those finish times. We've had a discussion about when you actually switch off. Now, you may not agree with those particular timings. This is just a sample that I brought up for one of my clients where they really work people particularly hard. And what we wanted to do was show this was a lovely opportunity to increase productivity and reduce the working hours as well. But having a conversation about actually switching off and also about breaks. All too often, for some people, you can be at home and you're just fixed to the screen. And suddenly you realize 4 hours has gone past. You've answered 1,000 emails, but actually you haven't got up, you haven't gone to the toilet, you haven't stretched your legs, you haven't had a drink. Have a conversation with them about breaks as well. It's a really, really valuable thing to do. So that's what we'd encourage you to do, is just have a conversation about structure. As soon as people start to map it out, so much of the fear goes, so much of the worry goes. So much of your worry will go as well, because as a manager mapping this out structure for others, you can now, it gives you that opportunity to talk to people about what they should be doing as they go through their day. And by the way, if you haven't got a good structure plan for yourself working from home, it doesn't matter what your level of seniority, I highly recommend it. Okay, so structure was something to fix. There were two more big ones that popped up as well, though. Here's the next one, and I think it was very honest, actually. Procrastination. You see, I could do that email, or I could hoover my lounge. I could do that email, or I can go and spend 10 minutes with my daughter. I could do that email, or I can make my wife happy by emptying the dishwasher, which I promised to do last night. It's really easy to procrastinate, put off, and delay, delay, delay. So, a couple of little bits of advice for you, and I wonder how many of you have already seen this. So if I show you this little symbol, I wonder if it means anything to you. We're talking about procrastination, and there is a frog on the screen. And of course, for some of you, you would have instantly got it. I'm talking about the classic Eat the Frog video. One, absolutely, Sonali, you got it, definitely. Oh, I love that people are putting in Eat the Frog. That's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to send out on Friday the summary sheet for you, and also a link to Eat the Frog. Yeah, great. I can see lots of people recognize this video. If you haven't seen this video, feel free not to wait for our link. Just go to YouTube, type in Eat the Frog, do it after this session, and for 1 minute and 14 seconds, you will have some beautiful wisdom given to you. It basically says this: if the first thing you do each day is the most unpleasant task, the rest of your day will be more pleasant. That's what it really says. I can tell you that my wife and I, my colleagues and I, we have conversations that go like this. So let's say I'm speaking to my business partner, Faris. I might say, Faris, have you had a good day? And he says, I've had an excellent day. I ate 2 frogs by 9:30. And it's lovely. It's this idea of getting out of the way the really, really difficult stuff that you find distasteful. Now, a frog can be a task or a person you need to speak to. The key thing is go eat your frogs. It is wonderful. And I'm going to let the video do the best narration on that, because Brian Tracy, who came up with the idea, who copied it, by the way, from Mark Twain, I believe, and a couple of others as well, have all said that getting that unpleasant task done first is the best, and I'll let that video just explore those issues for you. Our 5th point in what can be a problem when working from home, well, you've probably guessed the 5th one, this last one that's going to pop up, and it is the technology. All I would say with this is recognize the difference in terms of project management terminology between the difference between an input and a constraint. You can view technology as a constraint. Oh, my technology doesn't allow me to do this. Or you can view it as an input. Because of my technology, I need to do something this way. You may notice that we are right now doing a virtual session for, what do we have? 307 people on. That is why I am not playing live video with you. At the moment in the UK, it's really difficult to do video over a training session for 300 people. It's not impossible, by the way, not impossible at all, but we invite risk. And in order to avoid that risk, we simply sent you the videos before the session, well, one video, and we'll send you one video after the session. So think about what the technology can do and what it can't do. And one of the things it can do generally really well is enable some good video face-to-face meetings. We don't enforce these on people. Some people find it very uncomfortable to be on a video, but generally speaking, this is a lovely way for you to have those team chats and those personal chats as well. Just answering the previous question there about how important is face-to-face video. Okay, that's what we might need to coach people on. There are other things that can pop up, but just remember, ask them what they think the solution may be. Ask them what possibilities they have. Sometimes you need to tell them an answer, but where possible, your people will thrive if you can help them start thinking and solving their own problems instead. From coaching, we lead to communication. And of course, communication is key to clarity. It's part of coaching, and ultimately communication really absolutely at the heart of everything we do. There's a few things that we want to talk about here, and the first one is the frequency of communication. So I've put up here communicate frequently, but actually that's different for everyone. For some people, and I'm going to show you a little model in a bit, For some people, lots and lots of communication is great. For some of it, it really isn't. So in a moment, I'm going to show you a simple Jungian methodology. So any of you who are into SDI, MBTI, Insights, PQR32, PF16, and the list goes on, this is a basic Jungian methodology that will help you think about how much communication and what kind of communication for each individual. But make sure we do it. Make sure we focus on the intra and inter-team communication. All too often when we're setting up virtual sessions, we think about, okay, I really need to speak to my team. I really need to speak to my team. And what we don't think about is my team needs to speak to another team. Some of the best ideas can happen by accident when two teams are just sharing what they're up to. So in order to help this, you may want to think about having representatives of teams who then meet to have a cross-team share. This is a bit like one of the agile scrum meetings that we were talking about earlier. But now instead of having a team meet, we're having representatives of different teams. And the idea is those representatives then start taking that back and sharing that with their wider team as well. Ruth, I'm just going to pick up on that statement you've mentioned there because I think that's really quite good. Ruth has shared, we are finding that staff's motivations are changing with lockdown. How do we encourage, reward and coach cross-functional communications and corridor conversations with similar level of effectiveness face-to-face? Yeah, brilliant. I got two questions mixed up there, my apologies. Task outside of their typical role. And then another one from Pedro, how can I replicate informal communication and corridor conversations? So now I'm going to deal with Pedro's first, and then Ruth, I'm going to show yours on the next slide, a solution to yours on the next slide. Pedro, have informal conversations. That's the answer. So none of this should be enforced, but you should allow your people time to do this. And one of the things that we do in our teams is we have a virtual pub. We don't meet every night at all. In fact, we don't even meet every week. We've done it twice so far over a period of 3 weeks, but it's been lovely. So I quite like a whiskey. I sit in front of my laptop with a whiskey. One of my colleagues likes a real ale. And the first thing we talk about is we take the mickey out of each other's drinks. And what we're doing there is informal team bonding. And that leads to some crazy conversations around politics, around COVID-19, around all those things. Emma said, pub quiz on a Friday works well. Absolutely. Just make sure you don't have too much structure, Emma, because one of the things you're trying to do is a free-flowing conversation. So few quiz questions is lovely because it can really bring people in, give them some time to laugh, to joke, then go back to some questions as well. It's all great stuff. So hopefully that covers off Pedro's question. We want to encourage intra-team and inter-team as well. A couple of other elements I'm going to look at, and then we're going to answer Ruth's question around changing and keeping those motivation points happening for different people as well. So the first piece that I just want to quickly mention, make sure you have your escalation channels open. Make sure everyone knows exactly what to do if there's an emergency. Do you want WhatsApping, texting, emailing, calling? Is it you that should be called? Is it your authority line manager, etc.? So there's lots of different ways that we can do this. The key thing is that your people need to feel comfortable on how to act in what they perceive as an emergency. Depending on your job, that could be very different. That could be a factory blowing up or a client being slightly unhappy. All depends on your job. But they need to be happy and you need to be happy that they are happy with the escalation channels, because then you won't worry about it as much. And use those scrums and video chats. Absolutely, get face-to-face where you can. Now, don't force this on people. It's really important. If you have someone that really doesn't want to turn their video on, do not make them turn their video on. The reason is the purpose behind all this is improving communication. And if you're putting someone in a very uncomfortable situation, you won't be improving the communication. So for the majority of the population in the UK, we are okay with having our videos on, but never force anyone to do that. Rachel, lovely question. How do you manage upwards to encourage virtual team meetings from head of departments, etc.? Yep, okay, so there's probably a lot more to do in terms of influencing. I'll give you one very, very quick influencing skill, but I'll give you two really fast ones. The second most powerful way the second most powerful psychological influencing force that we know of academically is group polarization. Maybe share a story where you said, I've seen two systems working, one where they haven't embraced virtual teams, another where they have. The one where they have, everyone's happy and there's massive improvements. The one where they haven't, they look a bit silly. And just leave that there. What you've done is you've now polarized two groups, an intelligent elite and a non-intelligent and ridiculed. And you are then leaving it for people to decide which group they want to be in. Now, you need to be careful with this, because if you've just been asking about it, then it could be seen as manipulation. So I would say give it a couple of days and then bring it up as examples, and make sure the examples you have in your mind are real examples, preferably from outside of your company. Real, so you're always telling the truth. Incredibly important when you're trying to influence others. We never lie, we never BS. It doesn't work, it will come back on us. And outside of your company, so they're not sensitive at all. And there's so many examples of both these things happening, definitely. The single most powerful influencing tool, I'm just checking my time. Yeah, the single most powerful influencing tool, ask, don't tell. Rachel, ask them, what is the benefit if we do this virtually? What is the cost if we don't? Don't tell them, ask them. People believe the rhetoric, arguments, and justifications they give to themselves far more than any that we get. Okay, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. Let's answer Ruth's question here and carry on with our communication piece. Everyone is different. I don't know what tool you're used to. I hope that you're used to one of the many personality profiling tools that are out there. Here is an overly simplified version of something called the Inner Ape tool. And what we can do is we just think of people as being in one of four preference areas. And that's what these are, by the way. They're preferences. That's all they are. A box on a graph will not define you. However, some people need a friendly, informal, and caring approach. Bear that in mind when you're talking to them. Make sure it's informal. Don't be afraid to share something personal that's happening to you, because these people will love that. On the other side, the opposite side, we have these people in the bottom right, red there, check in and set challenges. These people, actually, that's all they're really interested in. They don't need the fluffy stuff. They don't need long-winded conversations. Just tell them what to do and tell them you'll be incredibly impressed if they can pull it off. By the way, if we use the wrong technique with the wrong person, we're going to really demotivate them. For our yellows in the top right, and I deliberately map these colors to Inner Ape and Insights just to make it nice and clear for everyone. Use frequent, high-energy communication. Keep things fun, keep things light. Do keep them frequent, but do keep them high energy as well. That way, when you're speaking to your people, they are going to be motivated and energized by what you're saying, which is opposite to our reflective, calm, logical blue people in the bottom left there. We don't want as much communication with them because they really like autonomy. And if we are to generalize, this is the group that are least likely to be comfortable with a video chat. They'd rather have formal instructions via an email. Now, there aren't rules here, and I've tried to cover something in 90 seconds that generally will take about 90 minutes to go into detail on, i.e. how to recognize different styles and adapt your communication accordingly. But very, very quickly, here are some labels that just might help you think about who, you are communicating with, and how, went too far, and how to communicate with them. Okay, lovely. Let's move on. We've got two more to have a look at, but they are really important and they sit with all this communication and clarity piece. The first one is we're going to start managing this idea of reduced teams. We're going to do that with significance. Now, you noticed earlier, right at the start, we talked about this is the one area that wasn't positive, this sense of team. One of the best ways that we can start to really enhance that sense of team is to get people to think about why what they do matters. And I'm going to share a very, very quick story here. About 12 years ago, I was running a session on leadership for some financial directors in the NHS. 2008, austerity is just starting to bite here, just starting to. And we've got a situation where the financial directors say, yeah, but Nick, this is horrible. We're walking down the corridor and people are turning away from us. And in some cases, almost running away from us. A nurse or a doctor comes down the corridor and you know that they're there to help you. We walk down the corridor. People just know that we're there to take money away from them. I said, okay, why does what you do matter? Why are you significant? And they said, well, what we do is really important. It's financial control, but it's not like saving lives. I said, okay, let's just work through a little hypothetical, shall we? What if you didn't turn up for work? What if there was no financial control going on? What would happen to the hospital finances? Now, let's say I'm a patient and I come in February or March. What kind of level of care am I going to get? Well, Nick, you'd get excellent care. They would just throw money at you with abandon. It's lovely. Okay, and what if I came in with a really serious illness, but I came in November? Oh, well, then you're dead because all the money's already been spent. There's no medicines left. So let me get this right, ladies and gentlemen. Financial control is the difference between me living or dying. Let me make this absolutely clear, guys. What you do matters. It is significant. And if you don't do it well, the impacts are enormous. Now, I'm sure for many of you, your people are not in the business of saving lives, although for some of you, absolutely that will be the case. But for anyone, you can say to your team member, this is why what you do matters. And this is how it fits in with the wider team. And when we empower that sense of significance, it is beautiful. It's ethical, it's lovely, and it drives productivity enormously. There's some really interesting psychology that happens with significance that we explore in terms of resilience and purpose and things like that as well. So make sure your people know why what they're doing matters. We've just got a few minutes to go, and I have one final piece to share with you. It's a lovely little cheat that will make your life so much easier. Dashboards. Now, a dashboard, generally speaking, is a readout with some data that lets you quickly ascertain how something is going. A project management dashboard will tell you where the project is, where your resources are, and what's happening. What we often don't think about is it's really good for people to have a dashboard as well. As a manager, I like everyone who works for me to know what I want them to be thinking about, what I need them to be thinking about. So a dashboard is generally 3 or 4 things that you want your people to be able to tell you at any time, i.e. what they are really focusing on. Now, the great thing about dashboards is it increases clarity for them and for you as well. And when you know that they have those 3 items on their mind, it reassures you that everything is getting done, and it means you can switch off at the end of the day and go home and have your tea. So our last tip is have a conversation, a coaching conversation with your people around dashboards, what they need to have in the front of their mind to keep stakeholders like you happy, and have a conversation with yourself about dashboards to make sure you are clear what 3 pieces of information you need to have in your mind. So when your CEO gets in the lift with you, you can quickly update them on what you're doing, how it's going, and where the progress is, and make it relevant for them. Okay, timing wise, 60 seconds left. This has worked out beautifully. I haven't been able to answer all questions, but we have been able to answer most, which is great. So in review, we've had a look at the 5 principles of managing virtual teams. They are clarity, coaching, communication, significance, and dashboards. Nicola, I think there's a recording. If you want to chat to your account manager, they should be able to get you access to our previous one on resilience. And what we've covered overall is why virtual and home working has some really good options open to it, what challenges there are, and what you can do as a manager to help lead your team, protect and overcome those. And that led us into the 5 principles of managing virtual teams. Right, everyone, I'm going to wrap up. I'm not in any desperate rush to end, by the way, but I need to let you guys go. So I'm going to start wrapping up, and I'm going to simply say, have a think about what practical tools you're going to take from this virtual session. If you can give any feedback to your account manager, that's great. We're really keen to see that we're doing some good here. Otherwise, we're just wasting hot air. Although it's lovely to see all these comments. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. That's really, really nice. And I think, Rachel, feel free to jump in here. But once again, I think we're going to send out a link to the recording on Friday, if that's right. So I'm now going to shut up. Rachel, if you want to add in any final points. Thanks for all the lovely comments, everyone. That's really nice. Really nice to have all the thank yous.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Yes, as Nick said, you will all be getting a follow-up email on Friday, and that will contain a link to the recording of this webinar. It will have a link to the frog video, and it will have a link to a summary sheet of this session. We will also include a link to the previous session as well, as I've had a few people asking about that, having missed a session on resilience. So we will also include a link to that one as well. But the resilience session is currently on our YouTube channel. So if you look at the ILX channel on YouTube, you will see it there under the webinars playlist. But that's everything from me. So thank you, Nick. I think you're on mute now, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah, you see, clearly have enjoyed that. Seems to have gone down quite nicely. Excellent stuff. Lovely. Feel free to log off. I'm not going to log off until the last few people have gone, and that will give me a chance just to answer any final questions. And a little point of amusement, I'm talking to you from my front room, and while Rachel was talking, you may have seen me jump slightly. My little girl blew up a balloon yesterday. The sun's hit it, and it popped right next to me. When you're not expecting a balloon to pop, that can really take your breath away a little bit as well. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to log off. I'm just going to be having a look through the questions here and see whether we can answer any more as we go through.